Welcome back to my channel for more spine-chilling tales. Today I've collected terrifying true stories from real people. If you're new, please subscribe, like, and comment. Your support helps me bring you more stories. Now close your eyes, turn off the lights, and listen to these nightmare-inducing experiences. This story didn't exist even 3 days ago. I made a burner account specifically to talk about it, since it is still an ongoing investigation. I am also going to use pseudonyms and keep this story more vague so that it remains anonymous. I just can't stop thinking about it. It's devouring me. I live in a large, wealthy metropolitan area in a newer built mid-rise condo. The majority of residents skew midlife or older and are uniformly white-collar professionals or retired. That is to say, this is a very nice building in a very nice neighborhood. Monday after work, I got off the elevator and was hit with a smell. I got to my condo and told my spouse Taylor that either somebody had overcooked Brussels sprouts or somebody had died. Taylor ran errands Tuesday and confirmed that it certainly doesn't smell right in the hallway, that's for sure. I don't know what a dead body smells like, and that seems terrifically unlikely, so we go on about our lives. There was a cold, rainy snap this past week, and the smell kind of comes and goes, but it felt like it would be a rude thing to complain about to management. We just ignored it and knew it'd go away like every other burnt meal somebody made. Saturday was sunny and warm. Taylor was doing minor work in our unit, so they are back and forth all morning between our unit and the courtyard on a lower floor. The first time they come back, they say, "That smell is back, and it's worse." We both half-jokingly muse about how it's a body. The second time they come back, I hear voices in the hallway when they open our door. Our building is usually very quiet, so I ask if someone is finally having a party. There's a group of neighbors going around to all the units in our hall to see where the smell is coming from. Somebody on the floor below tried to show a unit today, and the smell, when they opened their door, was so bad they couldn't go in. Do they think it's a body? Yeah, that's the consensus. The third time Taylor comes back, they confirm a unit has been identified and the owner contacted. Riley, an HOA board member, is fetching the set of spare keys for the unit, 3 doors down from ours, smack between us and the elevator. There are more people in the hallway. Then all hell breaks loose. Suddenly the smell is 10x worse and unbearable when Taylor opens our door to the hall. Everyone in the hall is now wearing N95s or covering their faces some other way. Taylor talks to Riley, who just went into the unit and saw enough to confirm the authorities need to be called before they got back out and shut the door. Taylor asked if it was in fact a body. Riley confirms, visibly shaken. We've been smelling corpse odor all week. The body had been rotting there, right in our densely populated building. Every time someone opens that unit door, the smell floods out. Cops have showed up and are asking routine questions to the neighbors. We overhear them say the body was found in a bathtub, that CSI has been called, and they need to search the deceased car. The smell is so bad, I barely make it out of my unit before I run back and have a mild breakdown. Finally, we get out and evacuate the building for the day. I did not want to go back home, so after hours in the city, we return to sit in the courtyard with some neighbors and drink and talk. A few are pulled to be interviewed. The cops want their doorbell camera footage to try and determine when the deceased was last seen alive. We watch as CSI flashbulbs go off from the unit. The police in the building are wearing respirators now. The unit below, it has all its windows open to air out. We decide to go to dinner. We leave the building and run smack into the corner. I badge them in and hold the door for the gurney and body bag. 7 hours after the discovery was made. It would be freaky enough if that was the end. It's not. All the usual questions aside, why did no one notice they were missing for more than a week? Did they not have a job? Family? Friends? Strange details start emerging. The deceased was a one-bedroom renter in our building since it was built 18 years ago, the past 9 years in the unit where they died. According to Corey, who shared a wall with the deceased and who knew them cordially but not enough to know their last name. They were a retired military veteran, and there was hardly any furniture in the unit, just a single chair in the main room. No table or anything. Riley confirmed this and also told us there was a handwritten note on the refrigerator. In case of emergency, call the VA. Yesterday, a resident ran a background check on the unit and shared it with me. The resident was in their mid-50s. Not exactly die of old age to me. They did live in our building all this time, and in a few states before that, back to the early 1990s. But all the known associations are people who live in states far away. In fact, none are even remotely in our area. Their LinkedIn is sparse, though it does show current employment, that we assume is out of date, as Corey believed they were fully retired, and a military history. But there are no interactions, and the contact info links back to the LinkedIn page itself. So what did they do for the last 18 years? Nothing? Met no one? They have no social media we can find. The police don't seem to be doing much better, given that they're coming around to us asking the same questions. What's more, our building is undergoing construction, and we currently have a fire marshal on duty 24/7, who periodically make rounds on all the floors. In all my time here, we have never had 24/7 guards of any kind. And for them to be on duty when there's a death of unknown time and origin strikes me as odd. With more eyes on the place, you'd think they would have seen something. But I guess none of them ever saw him or noticed a smell. But then it got really freaky. On Sunday, a full-on trail of blood showed up leading from the main lobby into the elevator and onto our floor. It surely can't be from the corpse that left the day before. And again, the fire marshal who sits by the door seems to have missed whoever was bleeding all over the place coming in from outside. Emil complained to the board, and the board told them they don't know what to do about it except wait for the cleaning staff to do it on Monday. So Emil and Corey clean our floor lobby of the bodily fluids themselves. The police came back yesterday for more interviews. They called the VA to try and determine next of kin and medical history. The VA has no record of this person existing. Then last night, Monday, another trail of blood is found in the elevator and into our top floor lobby. The board president sends a building-wide email asking people to please clean up after themselves, or they will pull the security footage, which is likely already happening given the suspicious death. We are all frazzled and overwhelmed, and the last thing we need is someone free bleeding all over the place while an active investigation is happening. Emil and Corey, and I hope this is just a dog in heat and a lazy owner. But then why isn't the blood showing up more than once a day? The unit is still an active crime scene until detectives can determine a time and cause of death. There is still no next of kin to be contacted for the deceased. I don't feel afraid or unsafe, but everything in our hallway feels so open-ended and unresolved right now. Who is this person? I know Occam's razor says they were probably just someone with no friends who kept to themselves and lived alone and had a heart attack or aneurysm or something sometime last weekend and didn't have anyone in their life to wonder why they hadn't been heard from in a while. But even if the saddest possibility is the most likely, what is with the in case of emergency note and the VA having no knowledge or record of them? And it doesn't explain the multiple days of blood in the elevator either. I am really shaken by this whole experience, first from realizing what I was smelling all week, and then realizing how utterly sad it all is. But still, pardon the pun, something stinks to high heaven about it. I don't know who they were before they died. Apparently none of US did. I hope we get some answers soon. But until then, there's just an eerie feeling in our part of the building. I can't stop thinking that except to pay their landlord every month, it's like they never existed at all. This was a decade ago now, at a very difficult time in my life. I had moved to Northern California from the Pacific Northwest for grad school, living in a shitty studio provided by the school with too much stuff in it. No real chance to make friends yet. Unemployed for the first time in my adult life, living off what I could scrounge from odd jobs. I had acute PTSD that I believed at that time was going to kill me. I had been suicidal for years before this, and that made it worse. On the afternoon this happened, I was laying in my bed on my side, facing away from the wall with the one window above my head. California sunshine, sounds of campus outside. I was drifting in and out of nap when the previously warm and brightly lit room went cool, silent, and dark. Weird, but maybe a lull in traffic, a cloud over the late afternoon sun. But soon, I felt more, then saw a black shadow behind me. Almost as soon as I sensed the being, I don't know what else to call it, I felt it try to enter me and felt the most pain I've ever experienced. This wasn't sexual at all. Instead, it felt like the black shadow was trying to float into my body, to possess it or just to satisfy its curiosity. I have no idea. But it hurt so badly, like every cell in my body was on fire. I didn't dare turn around. I didn't think I could face what I'd see, and I didn't know anything else I could do to stop it because it felt imperative to stop it. My whole body was screaming. I could even feel my face form a scream, but nothing came out. The only thing I could think of to do was to just tighten every bone, muscle, tendon, cell in my body and try to force it out, or at least stop its progress. So that's what I did, and it kind of worked. At least that pushing through feeling stopped for a second. It started up again, and I tightened even further, my body in so much pain from the intrusion that the tightening was almost a relief. And it stopped again. I became aware that I had a sense of a silent, emotional response from the being as I relaxed a bit, and it attempted to intrude once more, but more tentatively this time. I tightened once again, and I felt this sense of confusion from the being as they withdrew their hand, body, from mine. They were genuinely confused and somewhat concerned about why I was doing this, why I wasn't allowing them in. Something wasn't going according to what they had planned or expected. I saw a shadowy part of them pass over me out of the corner of my eye. They seemed to be moving over my body, checking it out. I could feel their presence above my skin and get a sense of the size of them. They were just this cloud of black, darker in some parts, but almost see-through in others. They tried one last time, just a tendril. But I knew what worked at this point and tightened again, and the being withdrew their tendril and disappeared. The room was suddenly light again. I could hear sound outside just like before. But I still didn't dare move for quite some time after, terrified it would come back. It never did, but I still didn't sleep for weeks. I still struggled to lay down for a nap. What if it comes back? I don't know what it was or what it wanted. I spent many of those sleepless nights searching online, but got nowhere. It's honestly hard to get good results when you Google dark shadowy thing, try to enter me alien ghost, as it turns out. It seemed like most people would think it was sleep paralysis or hypnagogic hallucinations, but I've read about all of those, and it doesn't fit what I felt. I could move enough to tighten. I could feel my face make expressions. I could move my eyes. And I could feel its emotions, which felt very simple, with no malice at all. Like it didn't want to hurt me, and it was really puzzled that it realized or suspected it had. It seemed like the being expected me to be asleep, and this is what it really felt like, dead. I don't know if one of my suicide attempts that year wasn't supposed to have been survived and I got on some sort of list, but got spared somehow. Or maybe someone a few apartments over was a few minutes late to their final exit because their ride was delayed by me. Or if it was an alien of some kind. It definitely did not feel human in any way. I truly hope I'll never meet it again until it's my time to go. But I honestly wish it well. It scared the absolute crap out of me, but I really don't think it meant to. Its actions, whatever they were meant to do, felt remarkably simple and neutral. Like it was just doing a job and corrected its mistake when it realized it. The job was just possession. 4 years ago, my husband and I took an anniversary trip to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan. It was early-ish pandemic days, and the opportunity to be free of the tornado of constant home/work/parenting a toddler was as great as the lakes we'd hoped to explore. We split the trip into 2 parts, one part outdoorsy, one part relaxation. We started out kayak camping on Lake Superior, just off Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. We had a remote campsite out on Grand Island that we would paddle to in our sport-level, inflatable kayak, carrying all our food and gear for 2 nights. The paddle to the campsite had been challenging, but doable. We were medium-level kayakers, so after about 3 hours of travel with some poking around the island mixed in, we were very ready to settle in. The campsite itself was stunning. It faced a large bay that then opened out onto Lake Superior, beautifully framing the horizon in a way that felt almost fake. Off in the distance, you could barely make out the edge of Pictured Rocks. The wolves howled and laughed throughout the night as we sat around the fire, the woods around us lit only by glow lichen. After a beautiful first night, we woke up with a shining sun to enjoy the view, shake off the boxed wine hangover, and drink coffee before heading out to adventure. We made a loose plan to kayak towards Pictured Rocks, which involved a short, open water crossing that was potentially treacherous, but worth it to get to where we wanted to go. To our surprise, we nailed the open water crossing in a little over an hour. It was challenging, but the famous Lake Superior waves proved manageable, and our arms withstood the power of the current. We spent the rest of the day poking along the coastline, taking in the breathtaking rock formations and arches, soaking up the sunshine, and stopping at various beaches for exploration and snacks. At around 3 p.m., we decided to head back to the campsite to get settled in for the evening. As we stood on the beach, plotting our way back, we noticed that the rental kayak bros were busy hauling all the kayaks up to a shelter. We figured since it was late September, they were likely closing early due to a light end-of-season day. The tourists had also slowly trickled away, and we were left mostly alone. There were 2 options for heading back. The first was to go back the way we came along the coastline, and then repeating the same open water crossing we had done that morning. This would also take us against the current, meaning we'd be working a lot harder and adding time when we didn't necessarily have the daylight to spare. The second option was to take a straight line through a much larger open water crossing back to the island, which we could see plain as day ahead of us. It would be a much shorter and direct route. In our eagerness to get back to camp and still feeling ourselves over how well we'd been doing, we chose option 2. We started out and were feeling strong as we paddled along. The waves were picking up a bit, but that was to be expected once we got to the open water. We took a quick break and finished up the last of our snacks, confident that we would be back to camp in an hour or 2 to refuel our bodies. We'd been at it for probably an hour and the weather was turning. The sun disappeared and the clouds began to spit rain. Or was that mist from the waves that were gradually splashing higher and higher around us? The wind had picked up to a steady clip right into our faces. The water was cold. I can't pinpoint exactly when I realized we weren't moving forward anymore, but I remember looking over at the rocky coastline far to my left and realizing the particular rock that I've been tracking for a while had not moved even a little. It was still in the same spot it had been the last time I looked at it, and the time before. We were silent, neither of our stubborn asses ready to admit that we may have gotten in way over our heads. We plowed on. Another hour passed. Or was it 2? The minutes really did turn into hours as we kept paddling and paddling forward and getting seemingly nowhere. I was positioned in the front of the kayak, trying to keep us moving as much as I could, but the wind had other ideas. I scanned every direction, and there was nowhere to go that would allow for a safe landing. There was a rock wall on one side and thick brush on the other, both options very far in the distance. There was not another boat in sight. My husband pulled out his phone, but had absolutely no signal. We kept paddling. My husband was in the back, working his hardest to steer us in a straight line. At one point, he shouted to me over the din of wind and spray, "Give me your water bottle." I obliged without question and turned enough to see him open it up and dump its contents into the lake. "What the fuck are you doing?" I screamed, my survivalist instinct to ration our water having kicked in somewhere along the line. I then saw why he needed it. He was sitting in about 6 inches of water. 60-degree, late-season Lake Superior water. And he'd been in it for what was likely about 2 hours, or was it? Since he was heavier than me. It had all pooled around his end, and I hadn't noticed it. He started to use my empty water bottle to try and bail out the kayak while simultaneously paddling to keep us in a straight line. Unsurprisingly, this did not work. He chose paddling over bailing out, and we continued on. Again, we fell silent as we bore down. We just kept paddling and paddling. The waves got higher and higher. White caps sprawling out in front of us like an obstacle course we had to win in order to get to safety. My arms were absolutely on fire, and my back ached from hunching forward. I didn't know how much more I could handle. Resting wasn't an option. Rest meant the wind pushed us back, undoing any forward progress we had worked so hard for. I thought about our son. I thought about our house. I thought about my parents. I thought about my job. It was getting darker by the minute, and the waves kept coming. We were amateurs to rough water, so every wave proved a teachable moment. I was now sitting in about 6 inches of water, which meant my husband was getting close to waist deep. My watch had died somewhere around hour 3, but I didn't dare ask for the time. Through either telepathy or just practice after 10+ years of communicating with each other, we each silently decided our only option was forward. We just had to get into the bay that led to our campsite. The water and wind will be calmer there. So we kept going. We occasionally shouted words of encouragement to the other over the howl of the wind, but we were mostly quiet. I thought about how deep the water was. I thought about how stupid we were. I thought about the cozy Airbnb we had booked for the next leg of the trip. I thought about the kayak rental bros packing it in early since it was obvious to them the weather was going to turn. And then I looked up and the island was upon us. I wasn't sure when or how it got there. It was nighttime dark now, and I could see the silhouette of its tree line and the occasional low moonlight that poked through the clouds. We were entering the bay, and we each let out a tentative sigh of relief. When we finally pulled up onto the island, we both rolled out of the kayak and flopped onto the beach. We couldn't move. We finally figured out the time, and it was after 8 p.m. The whole thing had taken over 5 hours. We had made it, but it didn't feel like a victory. We had fucked with Mother Nature, and she had damn well almost won. It wasn't until this moment that we realized we were bordering hypothermic. Each of us were shaking uncontrollably and making little sense as we blabbered to each other and tried to address our many needs. We stripped naked, just right there in the open. We found blankets and mustered a little fire. We ate whatever we could get our hands on and drank water, then box wine. And we recapped what turned out to be the dumbest decision we had made in the 11 years we had been a duo. We spent the rest of the night figuring out how to get off the island in the morning. We both had kayak PTSD and had no desire to make the trip back any longer than it needed to be. In the end, we portaged the kayak and all our gear to a broken down dock on the opposite side of the island to shorten the return trip. When we finally got back to the car on the mainland, I cried. For days after, whenever I sat still, I could feel the waves of Lake Superior tossing me around. And with that phantom up and down, back and forth came that feeling of hopelessness. The feeling that I was powerless against the forces of nature. One does not mess with the big lake they call Gitche Gumi. We celebrated our next anniversary at a nice hotel here at home. We have not been kayaking together since. My partner and I were watching a friend's old house and his dogs in upstate New York while he was out of the country for work. The house is old, early 1800s, and huge and beautiful, but a bit creepy. But we needed to get out of the city, so we jumped at the cushy gig. We rented a car, and we were headed up from the city. Our friend had left earlier that day, and the dogs were in the house. I've been driving most of the way, but my partner took over once I got sleepy. They're driving us on a dark, narrow mountain road in the Catskills. The road on the right side of us is a small ditch that quickly rises back up into the side of the mountain. The road on the left side of us is right on down the mountain. Pretty much a straight drop. Our turn is coming up. We're the only car on the road and have been for almost an hour. My partner puts the turn signal on, and we're turning, and then we suddenly hear this revving engine sound behind us, and this sports car, like a 90s Mustang or something, going probably 100 miles per hour, zooms up next to us and swerves to the left to overtake us and make the turn before we do. My partner jerks the wheel to the right at the last second and slammed on the brakes, and we veered off and managed to stop with one tire crooked into a ditch, inches from crashing into the side of the mountain on the right side. The other driver truly almost T-boned the driver's side of our car. We would have gone straight into the side of the mountain. While we're catching our breath, police lights and sirens screech up behind us and past us, chasing after the driver. We sat there in the car for a few minutes just staring and breathing, talking each other down from how close we'd been to a fatal accident. We had both felt the rush of wind speed coming off that car. What would have been the impact force of it hitting us? Hate cops, but we hoped the cop would catch them down the road because we'd never seen or felt someone driving that crazy. After we cooled down, we scooted back onto the road, driving the last few miles towards our friend's house. And as we're going, a second cop car flies by, and then a third. We're thinking, holy shit, what is this? We're about a half mile from our friend's house when we see all three cop cars have pulled someone over. Great, they got him. But when we approached, we saw it was a giant pickup truck, not the Mustang that had nearly killed us. We slowed down and passed on the left. The driver of the truck looked really freaked out. We're staring at him because we're thinking, how could they mistake a truck for that Mustang? They got the wrong guy. There was a sound that at first I thought must be an alarm system, but once I fully woke up, I realized it was a howl, and it was coming from everywhere. We went a bit further, and we're approaching our friend's house up the road on the right. And I was looking up the directions our friend sent, pull halfway into the driveway, get up and open the gate, etc. So we slowed down to open the gate and turn into the driveway. And just as we slowed down to pull in, on the other side of the road, parked, we saw the Mustang. It was sitting right in front of our friend's house on the road with the door open, and there was a person in it. I panicked and barked at my partner to not slow down, to keep driving, because for a second I had this thought, don't let him see you go in this house. But we were already turning into the driveway, and I had to step out of the car and throw the gate open, and I kept telling myself, don't look at him, don't look, but I did, and he was looking right at me from inside the lit car. I can't tell much about what he looked like. White guy, middle-aged maybe, but his expression, it was this blank stare of determination. Like he couldn't see me fully, but right before I turned away, I thought he gave me a kind of snarl. I ran through the gate, closed it as soon as my partner drove through, and jumped back in the car. We sped up the driveway, jumped out of the car, fumbled the lockbox and the key open, and ran in the house, and started running around turning off lights, checking the doors, and closing all the curtains. His dogs are freaking out barking, but they're both little lap dogs, so it wasn't like they were going to protect us. We got all the lights off, and each grabbed a dog and huddled by the front window, looking out the side of the curtain. The car was still there, the door still open. We could still see his shape sitting in the lit car across from the bottom of the driveway. And the thing about this gate to the driveway, it doesn't lock. It's just a little wooden country gate with a drop latch. He could easily come up to the house. We watched the light in the car at the bottom of the hill from the window for maybe 2 hours. We kept wondering where the cops were, why they pulled the other guy over when it was clearly this guy who was the psycho, and how long he would sit there across from the house until the lights simply shut off. We think neither of us was 100% sure, but we kept going over it, and neither one of us saw or heard it drive away. Logic won though, and we convinced ourselves we must have missed it driving away, and it was just a reckless drunk driver who eventually headed home. We were both exhausted, so we decided to just get the dogs and pile in a bed in an upstairs bedroom. We were too freaked out to sleep on the ground floor and try to watch a dumb movie to calm our nerves. The bedroom was in the front of the house, and every once in a while I would see something out of the corner of my eye through the upstairs window and think it was the light in the car coming on again. But when I actually turned to look, there wouldn't be anything. So I'm proud to say we eventually fell asleep to Mighty Ducks 3. We both woke up at the same time a few hours later. It was maybe 4 a.m., and every light in the room was on, and judging from how lit the yard was out the window, every light in the entire house was on. We had turned every light off before we went to sleep because we were terrified of someone seeing in. And there was a sound that at first I thought must be an alarm system, but once I fully woke up, I realized it was a howl, and it was coming from everywhere. It sounded like it was coming from the walls and the floor and the ceiling and bed all at once. The tiny dogs were barking so hard, they actually sounded kind of vicious. I just thought, he's here. We had gone to sleep with the only weapons we could find in the house tucked under our pillows. My partner had a dull kitchen knife, and I had a hammer. We grabbed them and started to get out of the bed, and then the light started to move. First, the 2 ceiling light bulbs and the 2 lamps started passing it around our room, and it went in a circle for about 2 rounds, and then the noise stopped, and the room went completely black. We could see the light in the hallway getting brighter under the doorframe. The dogs got confused and stopped barking and slunk away from the door and went under the bed. Then the hallway light went out, and I could see through the window the reflections on the grass outside of other lights in the house flashing on and off. The porch light, the room next to and under us, and then all the lights cut off altogether. This is a house where the porch light is always on, and with emergency floodlights with a generator. This house can go off-grid if need be. This house has a full backup system, but there was nothing on. It was pitch black. Eventually, amid what the fuckus and tears and bargaining about who was going to go check the house or flip the breaker switch in the basement, we came close to deciding us both then finally agreed it was neither. We fell asleep again. The next morning, when we woke up, everything was fine. The lights worked. The dogs seemed untraumatized. We were shaky as hell, but the sun was out, and it seemed like maybe we just had some great spiritual misunderstanding the night before. We wondered if it was collective hysteria from almost being in a wreck and being stressed from being in the city, and we felt dumb about our kitchen weapons. It was when we went into town to get coffee and groceries that we heard some people talking about a wreck. The night before, the guy in the Mustang had tried to pass the guy in the truck about 100 yards back down the road, where we saw the truck guy pulled over. The Mustang guy had gotten too close to the edge and drove off the mountain and died. Were there 2 Mustangs, or was it a similar looking car? Did we imagine it? We had another week and a half in that house, and we slept with all the lights on, the hammer, the dumb knife, and both dogs every single night. I still haven't told my friend. He's back in his house, and he loves it, and if someone told me that shit, I would move immediately. I know that what I'm about to tell you sounds like a classic spooky story trope, but it truly happened, and to this day, my husband and I still can't figure out what we saw that night. Late one freezing cold February night, some 25 years ago, we were coming home from visiting friends. The fact that it was cold is important. It was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit, and the cold was biting. We were on the last mile to our house, and it was around midnight. We took a left off the Old State Highway onto a narrow half-mile long road that winds past a tidal marsh. The first tenth of a mile of that road is creepy even in broad daylight because of the stillness and hush and the trees hanging overhead on either side. At this time, a developer had built homes along the second half of this road, and that's where you hit the first street light as the road begins to climb. Prior to that point, the road is pitch black, and you need to put your high beams on. Just as we emerge from the dark and reach the first street light, we see her. Up ahead of us, walking in the same direction we are driving, is a woman strolling slowly up the left-hand side of the road, lit up by her headlights. Her back is to us as she climbs the hill. Her long blonde hair flows down her back, and she's wearing a diaphanous dress or nightgown that you can see the shape of her body through in the headlights. No winter coat or hat, and this is what chills me to the bone. She's barefoot. She is strolling up the street as leisurely as if it were a warm July night. My husband, who is driving, turns and looks at me with shock on his face, and we just kept driving. Neither of us looks over our shoulder back at her as we pass her. We are irrationally afraid to. What if she isn't there when we look back? When we got home, just 2 minutes later, we raced into the house, turned on all the lights, and talked about what we had seen. We tossed around every rational explanation we could think of. She was sleepwalking, she was mentally ill, she had an inability to experience cold or pain. But where had she come from? The direction she was walking from was either the old state highway or the tidal marsh. We debated whether to call the police, but what would we have said? It would sound ridiculously implausible. A woman in a thin cotton gown walking barefoot on a freezing winter night? The next night, which was just as cold, out of curiosity, I conducted an experiment. I took off my shoes and socks and attempted to go for a leisurely stroll on our driveway. After just a few steps, I found that it wasn't humanly possible to. So who or what did we see? Fresh out of nursing school, I got my first real job in a fairly large hospital in a department that I honestly never thought I would ever work in. It was a 6-bed cardiac ICU with rooms that overlooked the city capitol building. It was a very nice unit, and I started out working 12-hour night shifts. The hospital I worked at had 4 other ICUs that were always full, so my unit always ended up being code bed, meaning if someone was arrested or went downhill fast somewhere around the hospital, they came to us. I had been working there for a year, and I was no stranger to death. Each patient of mine who had died on my shift was usually already on their way out. Their families were by their side, the DNR order was signed, the funeral home was already picked out. It was rarely ever a surprise. In fact, the only time I was ever needed to do CPR on my shift, it was not even in my department. So I went on a nice long 2-week vacation, got engaged, and had a beautiful tan. On my first night back, I received a report from the day charge nurse. She said she was off for a few days and suggested to remind the next day charge nurse that the priest was coming in the morning to bless room 4. I thought she was kidding at first, but she was serious. Apparently, while I was on vacation, every patient who was admitted to that room had died. But this came as no shock to me. People died often in our department, and it being a very religious institution, having a chaplain for almost every department, I just shook it off. Then she said that room 4 was empty and that it would serve as code bed for the night. Around 2 a.m., I got a call saying that they have someone to fill our open bed. The ICU downstairs was now going to be code bed, so we were getting your run-of-the-mill chest pain, take a look in the morning kind of patient. Nothing to get excited about. We get the patient admitted and all settled in room 4. He was a gentleman about 50 or so years old, very pleasant. His wife was with him and she looked dead on her feet. I got her some warm blankets and took her to our waiting room that had cots so she could get some rest. Around 3:30, I was watching monitors and the cameras in each room. All the patients were fast asleep. The cameras all cycled through about 3 seconds each on one small TV we had on the desk. Room 1 was fine, room 2 was fine, room 3 was fine, room 4, there was someone in there. It cycled too quickly for me to get a good look, and the doors to the unit were locked. Maybe the other nurse let his wife back in? I walked down the hall and glanced inside. There was nobody. I shrugged it off. It was late, I was tired. I was probably just seeing things. I went back to the desk and continued watching the screen. Room 1, Room 2, Room 3, Room 4. I was not imagining anything. There was someone in Room 4. The person was standing in the corner by the window, their figure completely draped in shadow. I could not move my body. It cycled through again. This time it was closer to the patient's bed by maybe 2 or 3 feet. The hair stood straight up on my neck. The next time it cycled through, it was even closer. It stood in the light coming from the hallway, but despite the light, it was still shrouded in darkness. It cycled through again, and it was right next to the bed. My heart started pounding, and I could barely squeak to the nurse on the other end of the desk. As soon as my words formed and I was able to make some kind of noise to get her attention, the alarm on the monitor went off, signaling that the patient had cardiac arrested. The overhead system came on. A card is needed in CCU Room 4. People poured into the department. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists. They all rushed into the room, but I couldn't move. It cycled through the rooms again. Room 4 came up, and this time the lights were on, and there were 10 to 15 people surrounding the bed, doing CPR and slamming meds into his 4. Someone went to get his wife from the waiting room. But there it was, in the opposite corner again, a dark figure watching this scene play out. Just standing there. The man died of a heart attack. Room 4 was blessed that morning, right on schedule, and I put in my 2 weeks' notice. It was near the end of high school, 2006-ish, fall in northern Wisconsin. Perfect stomping around town weather. One Friday after school, I was over at my on-off high school boyfriend Jay's house playing video games or whatever. Around 7 p.m., we typically would meet up with our whole crew at a local restaurant, but we still had several hours to kill. We were getting bored, missed those days, and it was so lovely out. So Jay suggested we go walk the train tracks on the west side of town. The town has been built up so much since then, but at the time, there was only a Fleet Farm and a small burger joint near the tracks, and that was about it. Miles of woods on either side surrounded the tracks. As it was perfect weather, and that doesn't last long in Wisconsin, I agreed, and we jumped in his car and drove across town. We parked his little car to the side of the burger joint. At this point, it's late afternoon, about dusk, sun about to set. We hop out of the car, walk about a block where the train tracks cross the street, hook a right down the tracks through the woods. That area didn't get as many trains going through as a different set of tracks in town, and there's also plenty of space to the left and right of the tracks slash into the woods if a train did approach. It seemed safe. You could see maybe a mile in each direction if a train was coming, and at either side, just tall pines. We're walking down, balancing on the tracks, talking shit, jumping over stuff, whatever for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Up ahead of us, we could see a few boxcars off to the side of the tracks. This feels creepy, but it was normal. As we approached them, we could see there were 2 boxcars attached to each other, maybe another 10 to 20 feet, and then a single boxcar behind them. I got the heebie-jeebies as we approached the boxcars, but they were both shut. So as we peeked around on them, climbed up, etc., they were less menacing. Cool. We keep walking. Sun is now down, and it's twilight. Quiet. We were both looking down as we walk past the boxcars, balancing and such. We get past them, maybe another length of a boxcar, when I just have this sense to look up. That's when I see it. I stop short. I swear the hair on my arm stood up, and suddenly I felt like a prey animal that had been spotted. Jay, what's that up there? There's someone on the tracks. He stopped and looked up. What looked like maybe half a mile to a mile down the tracks. Standing directly in the middle of them was the shape of a person, or what I thought was. But for how far away it is, the figure was unnaturally tall, standing stiff and still, arms at sides. with what looked like the shape of a bowler hat or something. I can still picture it. Now Jay doesn't fuck around with ghost stories and alien tales. He's a non-believer. But he saw it too. We need to go, he said. He grabbed my hand and spun me back to the direction we came from. We were walking very briskly, but if you have ever been on train tracks, you know it's all small rocks and pebbles, so it's a little rough. About a minute passed. My heart was pounding, and I looked back over my shoulder. This person, who was originally about a mile away, was so much closer. It's like he suddenly jumped half the distance between where he originally was to where we were. But still the same sickeningly tall, featureless shadow with a hat, standing still, arms to sides, stood in the middle of the tracks. Jay! I actually screamed, making him whip his head around. I've never seen this guy scared. He grabbed my hand tighter and broke off into a sprint. Jay is about 6 foot, and I'm 5 feet 4 inches, so his stride is a bit longer than mine. A couple years prior, I recovered from a fractured knee and femur, and it's common knowledge I cannot run. If you've ever seen the cartoons with someone running and the other person is kind of flapping behind the runner, held by the hand, that's what I felt like. He took OFF. My legs moved, but my toes barely skimmed the tracks. We ran past the boxcars off to the side, and as we're about to get past the two that are hooked together, I stole one more frantic look over my shoulder. There he was, one boxcar away. Same weird proportions, like a dark, opaque shadow. I swear my eyes bugged out of my head, and my body in adrenaline said GTFO. I forced my legs down and pushed my own damn self into a run. We plowed forward, no more glances back, hooked back in the street, and frantically fumbled our way back in his car, slamming and locking the doors behind us. I remember both of us sitting there, panting, staring forward for a good minute or two until snapping back to it with a WTF. The sun went down and nothing could be seen toward the tracks. We went to our hangout with the crew at 7, chomping at the bit to tell everyone what happened. No one believed us or cared. Really, I told my dad later on, and he says so many people died building that railroad, it was probably a ghost. Thanks, Dad. Fast forward to maybe 2011-ish. I'm in college, Jay, and I break up and don't keep in touch. I get a text from him out of the blue, a link to that Slender Man game. I remember sitting in my dorm with a chill as I watched the preview and felt sick to my stomach. How he only moves toward you when you aren't looking and is frozen staring at you when you look back. Ugh. I read the Wikipedia page and creepypasta and all that shit. I know all of that stuff is made up, but the similarity to what we experience freaks me out. Present day. I looked up the chunk of railroad where it went down in my hometown on Google Maps. It's much more developed with shopping and housing around, but there is still a little stretch surrounded by trees, which is the one we walked down. I'm going back for Thanksgiving and was thinking about taking a jaunt to the tracks, but reading all these spooky stories made me change my mind. Just in case it is some entity, I don't want to take it back with me. Just over 10 years ago, I was fresh out of college and had moved back to my parents' house for the free rent/food for 9 months before I was leaving the state for graduate school. To earn some scratch, I took a part-time gig doing some light bookkeeping for a small business owner guy that my dad knew. They had a business where you could rent low-level farm equipment, a small mom-and-pop type thing in the sticks. Since they knew my family, they trusted me to go in there for about 15 to 20 hours a week and check and file the rental forms, make sure nobody missed a payment date, answer an email or two discussing prices/availability, etc. Super easy gig. The old building where I worked was about 90 years old and at the top of this little hill. The downstairs used to be an old country bar until the 1970s. I could work any hours I wanted to as long as the work got done, so I'd usually go in after 7 p.m. and stay until around midnight or 1 a.m., since I knew I'd be alone and could listen to music loud and take my time. The office was on the second floor of the building and looked out onto the long driveway. One night during winter, it had snowed a few inches, but I was desperate to get out of the house, so I went into work at about 8 p.m. I always left the gate open at the bottom of the hill, since, believe me when I say that, nobody ever showed up at night. We were literally in the middle of nowhere. To even turn onto our short road, you had to only be coming to our specific building and know it was there beforehand. So I was jamming away to some Fallout Boy. Everyone makes mistakes when they're young, and having some coffee, and I kept glancing at the snow outside as I worked, since our one orange street light reflected onto the ground at the gate and was causing the light to shine off the snow in a really cool, dare I say beautiful, way. Around midnight, I went downstairs to do my bathroom business, then came back upstairs and got settled back into my work. I probably did about 5 minutes of work when I glanced outside and saw a huge imprint of something in the fresh snow just below the orange light. It seemed like a huge dog or substantial animal had just rolled around on the ground there on its back or something. Since I didn't notice it just 15 minutes before, it had to have happened while I was in the bathroom. I shook it off and assumed an animal was attracted to the light or something. At around 2 a.m., I was leaving and got out of my car to lock the gate, and to be honest, I had pretty much forgotten about the imprint in the snow. But when I looked down, I was shocked to see that it wasn't just some disturbed snow, but it was undeniably the imprint of a human-made snow angel. I used to make snow angels when I was a kid, and they're also very recognizable, so I 100% knew for sure that's what this was. And it was deliberately made underneath the light post. But it wasn't from a kid, it was from a very large person, and I already knew. Whoever had made this snow angel could easily have looked up and have seen me through that window, so they must have waited for me to head downstairs to the bathroom to make this angel. No cars had pulled up to our building. I would have seen/heard them, even from the bathroom. So I glanced around for footprints in the snow and saw that there was one set that led to the nearby woods to the right of the building. It was clear the person didn't use the road, but instead came from the opposite side, which instantly made me uneasy, since that side was just trees and darkness for miles and miles. By now, I was freaking out and trying to get back in my SUV. And that's when I heard it. Before I could get inside, I heard loud, high-pitched laughing coming from the woods. It almost sounded like a fake laugh, like the witch in The Wizard of Oz, like someone was doing it fake on purpose. It was close enough that I knew they could see me, but I couldn't see them at all, since other than the street light I was under, there was no illumination. After a few seconds of laughing, they stopped, and then it was just silence everywhere, except for my heart beating through my ears. Then, the laughing started again, though louder this time. More like screaming and laughing combined. I sort of froze for like 5 seconds, listening in a panic. Now, I spent a lot of time in that area, and I know what coyotes and foxes sound like at night with their high-pitched screeches during mating season, but this was very human. It felt like it was an adult man trying to emulate a woman laughing, like someone was deliberately trying to make a fake scary shriek laugh in order to scare someone. Well, it fucking worked. After 5 seconds, I immediately filled up with adrenaline, got in my car and drove the hell away from there as fast I could without sliding off the road. I worked there another 6 weeks or so and never had a single issue, though I knew where my boss kept his gun, and I always made sure it was there when I started my shift. And I certainly always locked the gate from then on. I went to a small college for women tucked away in a quaint New England town. In my second year, I was lucky to get a spot in one of the oldest dorms on campus, a stone building that students called the castle, covered in gargoyles and ivy and twisting turrets. It was built in the early 1800s. The rooms themselves had been modernized, but it still felt like living in a gothic fever dream. As a 19-year-old romantic, I absolutely loved it. I was surprised to get a room in the castle. When it was my turn to pick, and I saw that room available, I thought I had really lucked out. It was the smallest room in the building, but I still grabbed it without hesitating. I moved in the following September, and things were going great at first. I loved my classes, and I had made good friends in my first year. But within a few weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was on a downward spiral. Sometimes I sat in my room and just cried for no reason. I thought about how hopeless my life was, that I was never going to make anything of myself. Part of me knew that none of this made any sense. I was a straight-A student at a good college, had family and friends that supported me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was doomed. Whenever I went to class or hung out with friends on campus, I felt better. But every night when I got back to my room, the sadness would eat away at me. Soon I became convinced that my outside life was just distracting me from the true hopelessness of my situation. I began turning down my friends' invitations just to stay in my room and cry. I skipped class to sleep. I was in so much mental pain, I even started to self-harm by cutting. I had never done this before. It may sound hard to believe, but when I was in this room, there was no way to convince me that my feelings of hopelessness weren't valid. I was doomed. I knew it in the depths of my soul. My friends noticed how bad things had gotten and gently suggested that I should visit counseling services. I refused until one day, something happened that convinced me to get help. I was sitting on the bed in my dorm room trying to study. Instead, I couldn't stop crying. The pain inside me was so great, I was tempted to self-harm by cutting just to make the inner turmoil stop for a moment. I closed my eyes and suddenly, with great clarity, saw a girl sitting on the bed in front of me. She had brown hair that hung to her waist, and she was looking down at something, so I couldn't see her face. Then her eyes shot up toward me. She was crying and snarling all at once. The nastiest face I've ever seen a human make. Her arms were covered in blood. I had an overpowering feeling that she wanted me dead. I opened my eyes and sprung out of bed. A heavy mood hung over the room. The bed was empty, but I could tell she was still there. I had never believed in demons or evil spirits, but this was a feeling of absolute hatred that I can only describe as pure evil. I left my room and went to the RA. Suddenly, I knew that I had to talk about how I'd been feeling. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I told my RA about the depression and hopelessness and self-harm. Talking to someone lifted a weight that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. But I didn't mention the ghost girl on my bed. When I stopped talking, I expected the RA to send me straight for counseling, which I did end up doing eventually. Instead, she asked if I knew about the history of that room. She didn't want to scare me by telling me before, but given what was happening, I had a right to know. Way back in the early 1800s, the college had a program for students from low-income families. They could attend the college for free, but they had to work as servants to the richer kids. My room was reserved for students in this program. One year, the girl who lived there was relentlessly bullied by her richer classmates, whom she was forced to serve as a maid. The stress got to be too much, and she flunked out of her classes. When the college asked her to withdraw, she slit her wrists in her dorm room bed, dying by suicide. I stayed with a friend until student life could find me another room. As soon as I left, the depression lifted. And to this day, I'm convinced that if I had stayed, I would not have made it out alive. It's the 80s, it's Halloween on a weekday, and I, being the oldest and a girl, am responsible for taking two younger brothers trick or treating, along with two young sons of my parents' friends. My parents and the kids' parents are at our house playing cards and smoking cigarettes. Having had a lot of babysitting responsibilities and chores that my younger brothers did not have, plus missing out on going trick or treating with friends, I was definitely bitter and ill-tempered throughout the evening. Because it's a school night, we're just doing the 3 blocks of my street and heading home. We make it down one side and back down the other, and are about 3 houses from home when we get to the house of an elderly woman who lives alone and never gives out candy. But for the past couple months, she's been renting the basement to some guy. I've seen him around a few times, and he either ignores me or yells at me for riding my bike on the sidewalk, though he did seem to be pleasant and say hello to my brothers. So the guy is on the sidewalk with another guy. There's a folding table set up, and there's a notebook on it. The men tell us that they don't have candy, but they're giving away prizes for anyone who goes through their haunted house. As they're explaining this, a few boys my age from my school show up and ask what the prizes are. They list pocket knives, baseball cards, and the grand prize is a BB gun. The men tell them they need to fill out their names, age, addresses, phone numbers, and when's a good time to contact parents to get permission for the prizes. The boys fill out their info quickly, and honestly, at that point in my life, I was excited about all those prizes too. Basically, all the houses on our street were the same. I knew the layout of the basement, and I did not believe the haunted house could possibly be that scary. My brothers and the other 2 little boys were also excited to do it. I filled out my own info along with my brothers, and then we're all about to head around back to enter the basement door. Then one of the men says, "Girls aren't allowed." The boys from school immediately start laughing and lightly taunting me, and are joined in by all 4 little kids. I feel my face get hot and a lump in my throat as they all walk away from me. I am embarrassed, humiliated, and seething with anger. The unfairness of it all. Having to constantly be expected to babysit these brats, cook, clean, do laundry for $0, and not even have a fun Halloween like a normal kid. And now I don't even get a chance to win anything. I want to flip the table over and destroy something. Then I get the idea to take that notebook, which has several pages of boys' contact info in it, and shove it into the sewer drain by the curb. If I can't win a prize, no one will. Just then, another group of about 5 boys from my Boy Heavy Street come by and ask what's up. Again, no parents present because it's the 80s. I take a deep breath and calmly as possible explain about the haunted house, prizes, and writing their info in the notebook, which they all do right away. We hear the group come around the side of the house laughing and bragging that they weren't scared. The men wait till they finish putting their info in the notebook and then start taking the new group back. They don't even notice I'm lagging behind. I grab that notebook and shove it in the sewer drain and get the heck out of there. The next day at school, it seems every boy in my class and maybe the whole school had done the haunted house, and each one thinks he will be the winner of some prize or another. I have a sense of satisfaction every time I hear them talk about it, because I know there will be no winners, as the notebook is gone, never to be found. To me, it feels like justice, but I tell no one for fear of getting in huge trouble. About a week later, still no winners, and kids have moved on and stopped talking about it. Around mid-morning, our teacher gets called out to the hall to talk to someone for about 5 minutes and comes back looking wide-eyed and scared or something. Each boy in the class gets called to the office and does not return. As this is happening, the remaining kids have no idea what is happening until one boy, Scott, comes back and tells me everything. Apparently, Jimmy, a kid in the other 5th grade class who was small for his age but the fastest runner in the whole school, was walking to school that morning and a guy tried to pull him into his car. Jimmy thrashed around wildly and kicked the guy several times as he was trying to pull him in. He eventually got away and ran as fast as he could down an alley and got to his grandmother's house because it was closer than school or his own house, and he knew she'd be home to help him. Jimmy recognized the guy who tried to kidnap him as the one who had the haunted house in the basement apartment. So all the boys in the school are being individually called to the office and questioned by the police. During the questioning, each kid mentioned the notebook, and so the police did not want any kids to be home alone, as most of us were after school because in our neighborhood, typically both parents worked. The notebook basically gave the men a time frame of when kids would be home alone. When is a good time to contact your parents? Each kid filled out when a parent would be coming home from work, and the concern was that they'd have a guide of a good time to kidnap boys. When Scott told me all this, I had an immediate sense of dread, and not because I was afraid boys would be taken from their homes while their parents were at work. I knew that could not happen because they didn't have the notebook, but I was truly afraid I would get in trouble for hiding it. Later, everyone found out that the police had gone to arrest the men, but they were not found. The apartment was searched, and there was no sign of the notebook, but pictures were found. As a teenager, I was finally told the pictures were graphic and included violent child pornography involving young boys. Our whole town was on high alert, and many of us latchkey kids came home to our first babysitter. Ours was a high school student named Sharon, who was the youngest of 3 girls in her family, and she was wonderful. I slowly got over the nagging fear that the notebook would be fished out of the sewer and my fingerprints identified, and I fully enjoyed my time with her. For once in my life, I was not a servant and second-class citizen to the boys in my house. She was kind to all of us, but she made it clear that I was her favorite. I never got to go to tumbling or gymnastics classes because we didn't have extra money for that. But the first thing Sharon did with us on that first day was teach us all to do cartwheels. My brothers lost interest after that, but she went on to teach me front and back walkovers, back handsprings, and aerials/cartwheels with no hands. She painted my nails and French braided my hair. She would talk to me constantly, tell me about her teachers, her classes, friends, boyfriends, and listen intently to whatever grade school family drama I had, asking questions or offering advice. She was exactly what I needed at that point in my life, and I secretly marveled at the series of events that brought her to us. She sat for us for close to 2 years. We got older, and she needed to move on as well. This was pre-internet/Facebook, and sadly I lost touch with her. I knew that she had moved out west and had done some modeling as well as some acting and was doing well. Then in my 20s, my mother called me in my apartment to tell me that Sharon had been brutally murdered in her home, stabbed over 30 times by a man she dated only a couple times who had been stalking her. We moved into a new-to-us house 6 months ago. There are 2 large bedrooms upstairs and 2 small bedrooms on the main floor. My husband and I take one of the upstairs bedrooms, and our 2-year-old daughter is in the other. Since moving in, she's been a bad sleeper, up several times during the night, sometimes crying, sometimes talking. We put an extra bed in her room and take turns sleeping with her, so at least one of us gets a decent night of sleep. The ceilings slope in the bedroom, and the only window is at the end of the room, so we have a twin bed on each side of the window with a 6-foot space between the beds. Our daughter is very active, walks, talks, crawls, and climbs. One night, it's my turn to sleep with her. She gets in a bed with me, lying alongside me. I don't know what time it is, but it's dark outside, though we get a bit of light from the neighbor's garage through the blinds that don't quite close. Usually, when she talks or gets up, I ignore her. I don't want her to wake up even more. I even keep my eyes closed lest we make eye contact, and it's game on, as she's up for the day. But this night, she gets in bed and is still. I'm sleeping on my stomach, and she moves so she's laying on my back. She's a solid 2-year-old and quite heavy, so I shift a little to get her to move, but not fall off me. She keeps climbing and putting her arms around my neck. She's cold, but it's a chilly night, and if she's climbing on me, then she's just not been covered by a blanket. She's very persistent, and this feels like it's going on forever. I'm getting frustrated that she's not just going back to sleep. She's on my back, scooching down and laying on my legs, then back up to my back with her arms around my neck. I finally crack and say, "Will you please just go to sleep?" At which point my daughter, from the other bed across the room, asks, "What's that, Mummy?" The weight on my back instantly lifts, and I look over to see my daughter sitting up in bed, literally on the other side of the room, looking at me. I take her and book it into the main bedroom. The next day, we move her bed to a downstairs bedroom and take turns sleeping on the floor next to her bed. Nothing felt ominous, just somewhat playful, though not eager to experience it again. So, this story is pretty simple, but it always stuck with me. I grew up in the thick of southern Appalachia. I never gave much credence to the old folktales I heard, and there were plenty. I met my boyfriend when I was 16. Drugs had saturated our area. To party, we would ride down the mountain in his black Honda Civic, out the several miles of gravel road to the army camp at the river to party. This particular night, there was going to be a meteor shower, and we wanted to see it. We crept through the darkness, down the winding mountain, across the bridge, down the access road toward the river. I had been there 100 times. The night felt unreasonably dark, heavy almost. There were no real residences on this road that led right to the waters of the freezing New River. I was not really a believer of anything supernatural. I'm still really skeptical. We were rumbling down the road, and nothing seemed out of place until we saw it. In the road ahead, a black dog. Not a wolf, but easily just as big. A Great Dane, if I've ever seen one, and I had not in real life. There are no residences, nothing around that would make you think that this expensive dog would be on this road. But there it stood in our headlights, and my boyfriend rolled to a stop as we looked at it. It was kind of postured. I don't know. It was illuminated by our headlights, hackles up in a way I'd never really seen. It just stood there. He beeped his horn and started creeping closer in the car. This dog did not care, was seemingly unconcerned. The closer we got, the more unreasonably unnerved I felt. It was just staring at us, like I could feel its gaze, through the windshield, until it was practically against the bumper and it was not going to move. We were at a standoff. So, my boyfriend went around. He painstakingly cut his wheels, went off the gravel road to go around this unmoving hulk of a black dog. If it was in the middle of the road, we veered to the left of it so that it was on my side as we moved past. I remember how it stared at me. It was so tall that it was eye level with me in the passenger seat. I remember begging him to hurry past because there was this awful feeling that it was aware of my discomfort. I'll never forget staring into its shock yellow eyes, right at eye level as we veered around. It stared at me, unmoving, unbothered. Then we just rolled around it. Its head didn't move. It didn't adjust its gaze as we continued. It disappeared into the inky darkness of that road, and I felt so cold, so upset. We got to the river, and I refused to leave the car. I had this unmistakable feeling that that thing was still out there, just beyond the trees, somewhere out in that pitch black. There was a meteor shower that night, and I barely watched it though the car's sunroof because all I felt was that gaze, those horrible yellow eyes. It was still out there. I never liked going back to the river after that. I can't even describe the sense of dread, the feeling of a thing being so out of place. I never saw it again, though, but I'll never forget it. I never knew something that seemed so common. It was just a dog. Could make me feel such deep dread, such palpable unease. Even now, thinking of those eyes makes my throat tighten. I feel like I saw the devil that night.